Sarah remembers the exact moment. Tom was 14 months old, sitting in a patch of sunlight on the living room floor, stacking blocks. Not building, just stacking. The same 4 blocks, over and over, in the same order. She called his name. He didn't turn. She called it again. Nothing. At the time, she told herself he was just focused. Parents tell themselves that a lot. But there is a real research-backed pattern behind moments like this one. And once you know what it looks like, you start to see it clearly instead of guessing. This is what the early signs of autism actually look like, and why noticing them early changes everything that comes next. Sarah remembers the exact moment. Tom was 14 months old, sitting in a patch of sunlight on the living room floor, quietly stacking blocks. Not building anything, just stacking the same 4 blocks over and over in the exact same order, again and again. She called his name once. He didn't turn. She called it again, a little louder this time. Still nothing. At the time, she told herself he was focused. Parents tell themselves that a lot in the early months, before they understand what they're seeing. But there is a real, research-backed pattern hiding behind ordinary moments like this one. And once a parent understands what that pattern looks like, they stop guessing and start seeing their own child clearly for the first time in months. This is what the early signs of autism look like in real life, inside real families, long before any formal diagnosis. Not a checklist read aloud in a clinic, but small, ordinary moments that quietly repeat themselves until a pattern finally becomes impossible to ignore. Every parent replays the early months over and over, searching for clues they might have missed. That instinct is normal, and it turns out to be what researchers themselves do too, studying the earliest visible signs long before a child ever turns 3. Autism is not something that suddenly appears out of nowhere at age 3. The signs are usually already there, much earlier, often before a first birthday, quietly woven into ordinary moments that look, to an untrained eye, like nothing worth noticing at all. Tom's family didn't know any of this yet back then. To them, he was Tom, a curious baby who loved the ceiling fan more than every one of his toys, who could sit alone contentedly for hours. He was just Tom, a curious baby who loved watching the ceiling fan spin more than he loved any of his soft toys scattered around him, eyes wide and fixed upward, still, absorbed, for far longer than most babies his age. Autism is a spectrum, a word used so often now that it can start to lose its real meaning. But here it matters, because no 2 autistic children look the same, and the signs in this video will not apply equally to every child. Researchers also watch for early gestures, like waving bye-bye, clapping along to a song, or reaching up to be picked up. These physical gestures usually appear before 18 months and are another form of shared communication between parent and child. Having just 1 or 2 of these signs does not automatically mean a child is autistic, and that distinction matters here. What pediatricians and researchers look for is a cluster, several signs appearing together across several different areas of early development over time. Let's start with the first category researchers study closely: social communication. This is often where families notice the first differences, long before language even enters the picture, in the quiet, wordless exchanges between a parent's face and a baby's attention. By around 9 to 12 months, most babies begin using something researchers call joint attention, pointing something interesting, and then looking back at a parent's face to silently check whether they noticed it too, sharing that discovery together, wordlessly, instinctively, warmly. For some autistic toddlers, this skill doesn't develop in the same way. They might reach the object they want, or even point at it clearly, but they often don't look back to check whether a parent is sharing that same moment with them. Eye contact is another commonly discussed sign, though it's important to understand what that means. It isn't the complete absence of eye contact, which is a common myth, but rather a real difference in how and precisely when that eye contact is used. Some autistic babies make plenty of eye contact during energetic physical play, like tickling or roughhousing, but less during quieter moments of shared attention, such as sitting still together and looking calmly through the pages of a picture book side by side. Around Tom's first birthday, Sarah began noticing something small but persistent. She sometimes had to say his name 3 or 4 separate times, or physically walk into his direct line of sight before he would turn his head and respond to her at all. A consistent pattern of not reliably orienting one's name by around 12 months is one of the most studied early markers in autism research, because it quietly reflects something deeper about how a developing brain prioritizes social sounds over background noise. Language differences show up here too, though not always as being a late talker. Some autistic children experience real delays in babbling and in speaking their first words, taking longer than other toddlers their age to reach these familiar early milestones. Other autistic children speak early, but in unusual ways, repeating entire phrases they've heard before, almost word for word, a well-documented pattern researchers call echolalia, where language sounds more like a memorized script than like spontaneous back-and-forth conversation between two people. Michael still remembers Tom, around 2 years old, repeating one full line from a cartoon show perfectly, days after hearing it only once, using the exact same tone and voice as the character himself. At the time, it seemed funny. Later, it became a genuine clue. Social smiling matters too. The warm, reciprocal smile a baby gives back when a parent smiles first, usually appearing by around 2 or 3 months old. Some autistic infants smile plenty, but the timing and rhythm of that back-and-forth exchange can look a little different. The second broad category researchers study is repetitive behavior, alongside a strong, often powerful need for sameness and predictable routine, both of which can shape a child's entire day in ways that might look unusual to an outside observer at first glance. Tom especially loved lining up his toy cars by color, arranging them into one long, perfectly ordered row across his bedroom floor, adjusting each one until every single car sat exactly, precisely where he believed it belonged, with quiet, focused satisfaction on his face. If his older sister Lily ever moved even a single car out of place, Tom noticed almost instantly, without fail, and calmly walked over to put it back where it belonged, restoring the order that mattered so quietly, deeply, and to him each time. These repeated behaviors are commonly called stimming, short for self-stimulatory behavior, and current research understands them not as something strange to eliminate entirely, but is one meaningful way many autistic children regulate their nervous system when the world feels like too much. Alongside repetitive behaviors often comes a strong preference for routine. The same familiar path walked to the park every single time, the same specific cup used at breakfast, the same predictable bedtime sequence repeated in the exact same comforting order every night, the same tree-lined sidewalk walked toward the neighborhood park, the same favorite cup poured every single morning at breakfast, the same comforting nighttime routine repeated in the exact same reassuring order night after night, providing Tom with real, quiet, dependable stability throughout his day. This reaction is not a tantrum in the familiar way most people usually picture one happening. It's much closer to an entire internal system suddenly thrown off balance, one that needs calm, patient, consistent help finding its way back to steady ground. Intense, narrowly focused interests are also common among autistic children, going well beyond liking something casually, and instead becoming a deep, almost expert-level focus on one topic, sometimes nearly excluding almost everything else happening around that child during the day. For Tom specifically, this deep fascination started early with ceiling fans, and later grew into an equally intense, genuine love of maps, each one studied for long stretches of quiet, focused time, carefully, patiently, with the same steady wonder he'd once shown that spinning fan. The third broad category researchers study is sensory processing. And it's the one many families miss at first, because it doesn't initially look like a developmental sign at all, but rather like a surprisingly strong reaction to ordinary, everyday things. Sound sensitivity is common among autistic children, including strong reactions to the vacuum cleaner, a loud hand dryer, or a crowded, noisy room, producing a level of visible distress that can seem out of proportion to the actual sound itself to an outside observer. Light sensitivity matters too, with harsh overhead fluorescent lighting bothering some autistic children in ways that most adults barely even notice or consciously register at all during an ordinary errand like walking briskly through a brightly lit grocery store aisle together side by side. Texture sensitivity commonly shows up too, often around certain foods, scratchy clothing tags, uncomfortable sock seams, or even the simple, ordinary sensation of having wet hands, each one capable of producing real, visible discomfort in a child who is otherwise calm and perfectly content. Some children are sensory seekers rather than sensory avoiders, craving deep pressure, enthusiastic spinning, or constant movement throughout the day, actively pursuing these intense physical sensations rather than avoiding them, finding real comfort and genuine joy in this kind of active experience. None of these individual signs on their own mean anything definitive about a child's development. And it's important for every parent watching this video right now to hold on to that reassurance firmly, rather than immediately jumping to worry over any single moment. This next part is the part that matters most of all. Noticing these early signs was never about labeling a child in any negative way, but rather about understanding that same child more clearly, sooner, so real support could meaningfully begin that much earlier too. Research consistently shows that early intervention, including speech therapy, occupational therapy, and broader developmental support, has its strongest measurable impact when it begins early during the toddler years, precisely while a child's brain is still actively building its most foundational pathways. Sarah and Michael didn't receive Tom's diagnosis overnight, and that gradual, sometimes uncertain process is normal for most families to experience. It took a full developmental assessment, several detailed questions, and real patience from everyone involved before any clear picture finally emerged. It took a careful, thorough assessment, and crucially, it took an attentive pediatrician who listened closely to every one of the small, seemingly ordinary details Sarah and Michael had almost dismissed entirely, moments that turned out to matter far more than they realized. Watching for these signs can be genuinely exhausting for parents too, carrying quiet worry alongside ordinary daily life. Self-compassion matters here just as much as observation does, because a tired, anxious parent has less patience left over for the child. What Sarah and Michael ultimately received, in the end, wasn't any kind of loss at all, but something closer to language itself. A new, clearer way to finally understand the same son they had already loved so deeply and so completely, right from the start. The diagnosis itself never changed who Tom fundamentally was as a person, not even slightly. What it changed instead was how clearly and how well his family could finally see him, understand him, and support him as the unique child he had always been. If anything at all in this video felt familiar while you were watching, that feeling is worth listening to closely. Not as any kind of formal diagnosis, since only a licensed professional can ever provide one, but as a real reason to have a conversation. Track patterns rather than isolated moments. Bring specific, concrete examples instead of vague worries directly to your pediatrician. And never wait for complete certainty before asking for a proper developmental evaluation, because screenings themselves were designed for moments filled with uncertainty, like this. Noticing these early signs was never about fear, and it never needs to be. It's about giving your child the best possible head start in life, while also giving yourself the clear language to understand them fully, sooner rather than later on. You are not alone in noticing, and you are not alone in wondering. Thousands of families walk this same uncertain road every year, and most of them say the same thing afterward. Understanding came as relief, not as bad news.